It's been one heck of a month. I've gone into how much I love both the levels and the bosses, and torn into those bosses that utterly fail. And now, it's time I wrap things up by talking about the games themselves. Now, Sonic games vary in quality, ranging from games that are universally loved to games that are bashed like crazy. But the ones that shine really do shine, and I'm here to honor the ones that have pulled me in the most. So let's blast through the end with Sonic Speed, shall we? So the original Sonic the Hedgehog was a hit. It had a lot of things that impressed people worldwide, and when that happens, sequels are sure to follow. And 1 year after the original, we got Sonic the Hedgehog 2. This game improved upon everything the original offered. While each zone had fewer acts, the overall level design was much larger and more interesting. The levels offered a much greater scale and felt a lot more fun to go through. But that's not the only thing Sonic 2 improved on. It also brought us the Spin Dash, which is a godsend for the series. With this, the game got a lot faster, and traveling from one place to another got a whole lot more convenient. Also, it was in this game that introduced us to Sonic's DBZ card, also known as Super Sonic. And in this game, if you have Super Sonic, you can beat the game really easily, except in Death Egg Zone. Also, as a side note, this was Tails' first game, and I love him. What makes Sonic 2 stand out to me, and what makes it a beloved classic in the gaming community, is what it improved on from Sonic 1 and all the new things it brought. While I don't think it's one of the absolute finest titles in the series, I still very much appreciate it for introducing things that many Sonic games would soon follow with, and for just being a great game overall. Sometimes the most absurd ideas for games can lead to something that's actually well executed and fun to play through, and that's what I feel is the case with Sonic and the Black Knight. When it comes to treasured Sonic games, this one doesn't immediately come to people's minds, probably because Sonic was using a sword in this game, and it was considered a sequel to Sonic and the Secret Rings, one of the most hated games in the series. And while I can see why that is, since this game does have issues, I still thought it was awesome. I'll admit that Sonic with a sword didn't sound very fitting at first, but the way it's implemented into the gameplay was really well done. It feels very responsible and rarely gets in your way, and that's impressive since it uses motion controls as its basis. And despite using a sword, Sonic's still as fast as he was in previous games, so combine that with swordplay, and Sonic can pull off combos that are just a feast for the eyes. Normally I don't pay attention to stories in Sonic games, but the story in Black Knight is a big highlight for me. It does seem kinda simple at first, but it becomes a lot more interesting to go along with, and the writing and direction the story went in was a lot of fun, especially later in the game. So while Black Knight is no masterpiece, I think it's one of the more underrated titles in the series, and it definitely deserves a lot more praise than it gets. Now, I wonder, if Sonic was going to end up in a mythological world again, where would he end up? I don't know. So Sonic 2 was one of the most beloved games in the series, so after some time, Sega knew another true sequel had to follow suit, and for the third installment, they stepped up their game even more. So yeah, Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Hey wait Jack, you're counting Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles. Isn't that a tie? No it isn't. Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles were meant to be one full game, but the boys over there at Sega had business troubles and time constraints, so they split it in half. However, they made a way for the games to be joined together and form the true third installment, and dang, did it leave a big landmark on the series. Since this is the third installment, the elements of Sonic 1 and 2 were expanded upon and made even better. First of all, the level design is a tremendous upscale. It features tons of alternate paths to get to the goal, and it also has loads of secrets as well, and they're really well hidden, and I mean that. You could play a stage numerous times and still have things left to do, and I love it when a game does that. Another step forward I liked was having both Tails and newcomer Knuckles the Echidna playable. They definitely spice up the gameplay and make things a lot more interesting. And speaking of spicing things up, another addition I liked are the elemental shields, which not only allow Sonic to take a hit without losing rings, but also make him immune to a specific hazard and give him an extra ability to his jump. These definitely add a lot to the gameplay and make some of the less enjoyable parts of the game a lot less painful. So in the end, Sonic 3 and Knuckles still remains a fan favorite game to this day, and rightfully so. It did everything better than its predecessors, and it still remains an awesome experience. Sonic didn't really have the best time shifting into 3D. While he did 2D well, 3D was a bit daunting for him at first. But then, Sega found a great way to start off Sonic's 3D career. Oh boy, we seriously got a big one to talk about here. While the Genesis Sonic games helped establish Sonic in the video game industry, Sonic Adventure established him in a new way that changed many people's views on the series as a whole. This game showed the Sonic series was more than capable of dishing out plenty of other things to like, as well as fun gameplay. The game features a much bigger story than the Genesis games, and shows that Sonic games can be much larger adventures as a whole. Even though Sonic made his transition into 3D, he keeps his speed and style perfectly intact, and the levels he goes through can be some of the most fun levels in a Sonic game. Special mention to Emerald Coast, Twinkle Park, and Speed Highway. Tails has a very similar style to Sonic, but he has much shorter stages and can go a lot more freely thanks to his flight. Knuckles' objectives may be different, but he still retains the abilities he had in Sonic 3, and his levels are designed to make use of each of them. You can also play as Amy, E102 Gamma, and Big the Cat in this game, but they aren't as relevant to the story as the other three, so I'll just say this. Amy does have a nice idea for a gameplay style, but playing as her really doesn't feel that special compared to most of the others, with one exception. Gamma does have a more compelling story and a more fun gameplay style, so he's good in my book. Big... remember what I said in my last countdown. There's a lot of other things I truly do enjoy about this game, like the overworlds and that soundtrack, but I'll say this. This game may have aged in some areas, but this still remains a truly fun title and a very important chapter in Sonic's life cycle. While Sonic 4 Episode 1 did get some praise, it wasn't as praised as the Genesis titles and was eventually left into obscurity, which caused Episode 2 to become obscure from the beginning. And that's a darn shame because Episode 2 is one of the most enjoyable Sonic games that I have ever played. Unlike the Genesis games in Episode 1, which mostly had basic Sonic platforming, Sonic 4 Episode 2 tried to make itself more interesting by adding in a team mechanic that allows Sonic and Tails to perform a team combo to help you get through the levels. With this mechanic, you can fly to various heights, act like an underwater propeller, and form a ball to crush everything. And the game is actually built with this mechanic in mind, leading to some absolutely great level design. There aren't that many levels in this game as a whole, but all of them have something interesting to offer, like some well done water sections, flying between hazards, and a bunch of other crazy stuff. With these, the game definitely sticks out, and it made me want to come back and play each stage over and over again. Oh, and they managed to get boss battles right when previous 2D Sonic games were rather meh with those. And if that's not a sign that this game is doing something right, then I don't know what is. This is definitely one of the most underrated titles in the whole series. It was pretty much shrugged aside when it shouldn't have been. It's definitely a huge improvement over Episode 1. A lot of people didn't hold Sonic Lost World in high regard. A lot of people saw it as a clumsy execution of some ideas that weren't fully realized in hindsight. But when I look at this game, I see something different. And I mean different. So if I don't see something clumsy, what do I see? Well, while I can admit that I can see some issues, I can easily look past them and see a fantastically made Sonic game. While the story isn't one of the best in the series, I did have a lot of fun following it, especially because the writing was still as great as it was in previous games, and it actually did a decent job with character development. But stories aren't the main thing to like in Sonic games, the gameplay is. So let's talk about that. Sonic Lost World is definitely more adventure-like in overall design. It puts a larger emphasis on exploration and finding multiple routes to find goodies and reach the goal. And I do believe that they executed this concept very well. I love exploring multiple paths in order to see what awaits me. Yet it still retains an incredibly fast pace that one would expect from a Sonic game, which I don't see people acknowledging that much. And this may be why. Speed is a reward for being able to pull off maneuvers and proceed to the levels quickly. And the way I see it, this also enhances the experience and made me want to get better at the game. After all, I thought that speed as a reward for good skill was something people loved in a Sonic game. Another thing I hear people harping on is the controls, and from my perspective, they're just fine. They are different than other games, but different can be what makes something special, and I feel that's the case here. They're really well implemented and feel really fluid. While this game isn't perfect, as some of the gimmicks didn't work, the 2D sections felt a bit sluggish, and most of the bosses were kind of underwhelming, Lost World is still an awesome experience for me, and it really is a shame that it got the fan and critic reception that it did. At least the game still has me at its side. When it comes to fan favorite Sonic games, I'm 99% sure Sonic Adventure 2 is one of the first games to come to people's minds. And while I do think that there are better Sonic games, Sonic Adventure 2 still remains a beloved classic in the series. And it is evident that SEGA went all out into making this a legendary installment, especially since it was meant to celebrate Sonic's 10th anniversary. Sonic Adventure 2 has a story that is split up into two perspectives, those being Hero and Dark. Each of them do share similar styles of gameplay, but everyone gets their own levels to make them stand out even more. The speeding with Sonic and Shadow is an absolute joy, because the way their levels and skills are designed encourage speed, while also adding in great platforming. Tails and Eggman stages involve them shooting and blowing stuff up, which can be a lot of fun depending on the level, and Knuckles and Rouge's levels have them treasure hunting, which in some cases can be fun, but other times, it can be an absolute migraine. And speaking of story, I really did enjoy this plot as a whole. Sure, there are some glaring moments, but the story did take a lot of nice turns and had a lot of moments that I can't get enough of, especially concerning Sonic and Shadow. So as a whole, while I don't think Sonic Adventure 2 is an absolute god power, it certainly gets a lot right for a Sonic game, and it certainly gets my approval. So, we go from a beloved classic to one of the more divisive entries in the series. Yeah, I will admit that there are some glaring issues with Sonic Unleashed, but the stuff that's done right is really done right. Now, we all know that Sonic can move faster than the speed of sound, but in Unleashed, his speed might as well be causing shockwaves for every zone he passes. I mean, good lord! So yeah, Sonic understood how to go fast insanely well in this game, so by extension, this should mean either really fun levels or annoying collisions. And because this game is number 3 on this list, you can guess which one that is. All of these levels have something interesting about them that make them feel like a dream. Yeah, except for Eggman Land, that level is absolute garbage. Now what I'm saying only applies to the daytime stages. The nighttime stages are an entirely different story. These are much different because not only does Sonic change into his Werehog form, but his abilities are changed drastically to a style where he has to take it at a slower pace and beat the stuffing out of everything in sight. Now, this seems strange for a Sonic game, but it's implemented very well. The levels are built to use each one of Sonic's Werehog abilities, and like the daytime levels, they each have something that makes them stand out. It's not some random crap thrown in, it's actually a pretty cool idea once you take a closer look at it, which will require that you delve into the story a bit. Speaking of that, Unleashed is probably my favorite story out of any Sonic game. It's an incredibly engaging narrative that is filled with a lot of great ideas, while simultaneously has the charm expected for a Sonic game. There wasn't a single moment in Unleashed story that I didn't enjoy. So while Sonic Unleashed does have some glaring issues, like the quick time events, some of the night levels overstaying their welcome, and one of the worst levels I played in any video game ever, Sonic Unleashed is still a fantastic entry in the series, and definitely one that deserves your time. This is going to be an interesting one to talk about since I'm currently Let's Playing this game at the time of this video. So I'll say something pretty obvious. Sonic Generations is amazing. Unlike previous anniversaries which featured huge chapters in Sonic's career, for better or for worse, the 20th anniversary of the Blue Blur actually has him going to various zones from his past to seek out whatever caused time to go distorted. While the story isn't too much to write home about, it works fine for the gameplay it wants to set up. And that gameplay is sheer brilliance. Since Sonic's visiting areas of his past, he's with his classic self, and this actually has bearing on the game itself. In one act, you take control of Classic Sonic, representing the old 2D nature of the franchise, and in the second act, you take control of Modern Sonic, representing the new 3D nature of the series, and the levels you go through are some of the best levels in the franchise as a whole. They're all reused from previous Sonic games, but they all feel new, because they got a great treatment in look and design. The same thing can be applied to the boss battles. They're all reimaginings of the previous bosses in the series, but they're made in such a fantastic way that makes them stand out. So what makes Generations stand out to me is that it offers a huge amount of fun to both the fans of the older days of Sonic and the fans of the newer titles. It's a perfect way to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Blue Blur, and it's one Sonic title I always find myself coming back to. Now let's hope what they got for the 25th anniversary doesn't disappoint. Let's see. A Sonic Colors level was number 1 on my Sonic levels list. A Sonic Colors boss was number 1 on my Sonic bosses list. There were no Colors bosses on my least favorite Sonic bosses list. You're beginning to put the pieces together, aren't you? Alright, this may seem like a cop-out, but I have good reason as to why Colors is at the top of this list. But first, let me get out what I don't like about this game first. Some of the level design in 2D didn't work, and I feel that the game didn't put enough emphasis on 3D. Okay, that's literally all I have to complain about, and by that, I mean everything else in this game passes with flying colors, which is actually very fitting. But what makes it so special? Well, first off, this Sonic game actually takes place in an amusement park in space. We'll question how that's possible, but I don't care, I'm thinking this already! And as it turns out, this amusement park is actually a trap set by Dr. Eggman to capture these alien creatures known as wisps, and drain of their power to fuel a mind control cannon. That's both creepy and insane. And I love it! What really makes this story for me is that, while I didn't feel it was a grand epic like Unleashed, it still had a huge fun factor and made me want to play the game further. Also, the writing is brilliant.
No copyright law in the universe is going to stop me!
That's just one out of many great moments in this game. But that's just story. How's the gameplay? Simply put, incredible. Sonic Colors remains very loyal to what the series is known for, and delivers some of the most fun levels I've played through in any game, period. But there's a bit more than just that. This game also marks the debut of the Wisps, which in my opinion expand the game even further and make it an even greater joy to play. Each one is crafted spectacularly, and it's fun to get through the levels with them. And while I said earlier that some level design in 2D didn't work, that happens very infrequently that it's almost unnoticeable. Also, good god, do I need to say anything about the presentation and the soundtrack? It's some of the best that the series has seen yet, and considering that this game was for the Wii, home to many third-party games that did not even try, that's an accomplishment. I could go on and on as to why I love this game so much, but that lasts longer than this video already has, so it's time to wrap this up. Sonic Colors is not only my favorite Sonic game, but it's also one of my favorite games of all time, and a game that made me proud to be a Sonic fan. I'm the Lightning Ripper, and everyone, thanks for sticking with me throughout this month. It's great to give a series some much needed attention and celebrate the legacy that it has. Sonic may not always have the best of times, but you can sure bet he'll remain a gaming legacy. Happy 25th anniversary, Sonic! You've still got some fans like me at your side.